The morning sun cast long shadows across the Royal Military Academy's training grounds as Marcus Chen adjusted his worn combat boots and checked his gear for the third time. At 22, he stood barely 5 feet 7 inches tall, with a slight frame that made him look more like a university student than a soldier. His dark hair was neatly trimmed according to regulation, but his uniform hung loose on his thin shoulders, making him appear even smaller among the towering cadets around him. "Look what we have here," sneered Lieutenant Davidson, a broad-shouldered man with piercing blue eyes and a permanent scowl. "The Royal Guard Selection Committee must be getting desperate if they're letting civilians play soldier now." A chorus of laughter erupted from the group of elite candidates surrounding Davidson. These were the cream of the military academy, sons of generals and decorated war heroes, each one hand-picked for their exceptional physical prowess and combat records. Marcus had somehow managed to slip through the cracks of the selection process, though nobody could understand how. "I heard his father owns a small electronics repair shop in the lower district," whispered Cadet Morrison, not bothering to lower his voice. "Probably fixed someone's radio and called in a favor." Marcus kept his eyes forward, focusing on the distant targets that dotted the shooting range. He had learned long ago that responding to their taunts only made things worse. Instead, he methodically checked his rifle, an older model M24 that had been assigned to him while the other candidates carried the latest precision weapons with advanced optics. Captain Rodriguez, the grizzled range master, emerged from the equipment shed with a clipboard in his weathered hands. His gray mustache twitched as he surveyed the group of 24 candidates, each one competing for only 6 positions in the most elite unit of the kingdom's military forces. "Gentlemen," Rodriguez's voice cut through the morning air like a blade, "today begins your final evaluation for selection into the Royal Guard Sniper Corps. Over the next 5 days, you will be tested on precision shooting, tactical knowledge, physical endurance, and mental fortitude. Those who fail to meet our standards will be returned to their regular units with a note in their file that they were found wanting." The captain's steel-gray eyes swept across the group, lingering for a moment on Marcus before continuing. "The Royal Guard protects the royal family, visiting dignitaries, and high-value assets of the kingdom. One mistake, one moment of hesitation, one poorly placed shot could result in the death of innocent people or the compromise of national security. We do not accept mediocrity." Davidson straightened his shoulders, confidence radiating from every muscle. His father was General Davidson, hero of the border wars and recipient of the kingdom's highest military honor. Growing up on military bases around the world, Davidson had been shooting since he was 8 years old and had won numerous marksmanship competitions throughout his academy years. "The first test is simple," Rodriguez continued, gesturing toward the rifle range. 6 shots at 600 meters, standard paper targets. You have 30 minutes to take your positions, adjust your equipment, and deliver your shots. Maximum score is 60 points, 10 points per bulls. Anything below 50 points is automatic elimination. As the candidates dispersed to claim their shooting positions, Marcus found himself relegated to position 23, the second-to-last spot on the range. The wind was stronger at this end, and the morning sun created challenging glare conditions that would make accurate shooting more difficult. "Bad luck, Chen," called out Cadet Williams from position 5, one of the premium spots with optimal lighting and wind protection. "Maybe you can ask Daddy to fix the weather for you." More laughter rippled through the group as they settled into their positions. Marcus lay prone behind his rifle, feeling the familiar weight of the weapon against his shoulder. The M24 was an older design, but it was reliable and well-maintained. More importantly, it was identical to the rifle his grandfather had taught him to shoot with during countless weekends at the family's small cabin in the mountains. Marcus closed his eyes for a moment, remembering his grandfather's patient voice explaining the fundamentals of marksmanship. "Shooting is not about strength or size, boy. It is about patience, breathing, and understanding the relationship between you, your weapon, and your target. The greatest shooters in history were not always the biggest or strongest. They were the ones who could remain calm when everyone else was losing their minds." The memory brought a slight smile to Marcus's face as he opened his eyes and began his pre-shot routine. He checked the wind flags scattered across the range, noting the variable conditions that would affect bullet trajectory. The breeze was coming from the southeast at approximately 8 miles per hour, with occasional gusts that made the flags dance unpredictably. Through his scope, Marcus could see the black bulls of his target, a crisp circle that seemed impossibly small at 600 meters. He made minute adjustments to his scope's elevation and windage knobs, accounting for the environmental conditions and the specific ballistics of his ammunition. "Shooters ready," Rodriguez's voice boomed across the range. "You may commence firing when ready." The first shot came from Davidson's position, a sharp crack that echoed across the training ground. Through spotting scopes, observers could see that his bullet had struck the 9 ring just outside the bulls. Not perfect, but a solid start that earned approving nods from the other candidates. One by one, the elite shooters began engaging their targets. Williams scored a perfect 10, as did Morrison and 3 others. The pressure was mounting as the sounds of precision shooting filled the air, each successful shot a reminder of the caliber of competition Marcus faced. He controlled his breathing, letting his heart rate settle into a steady rhythm. The crosshairs of his scope settled on the center of his target, and he began the final phase of his shooting sequence. Pressure on the trigger increased gradually, steadily, until the rifle fired almost as a surprise. The recoil was familiar and comfortable, and through his scope, Marcus could see a small hole appear in the exact center of his target. Perfect bull's. "Lucky shot," muttered someone from a nearby position, though the comment lacked the confidence of earlier taunts. Marcus worked his bolt smoothly, chambering another round while maintaining his shooting position. His second shot followed 20 seconds later, again finding the center of the target. The third shot was equally precise, as was the fourth. By the time Marcus fired his 5th shot, a noticeable quiet had fallen over the range. Other shooters were stealing glances in his direction, their own concentration broken by the consistent precision coming from the supposedly inferior candidate at position 23. Captain Rodriguez had moved behind Marcus's position, watching through binoculars as the young man prepared for his final shot. The captain's weathered face showed no emotion, but his experienced eyes had noted something that the other candidates had missed. Marcus was not just hitting the bulls. He was hitting the exact same spot within the bullseye with each shot. The final shot cracked across the range, and Rodriguez lowered his binoculars with the slightest nod of approval. Through the spotting scope, all 6 of Marcus's shots could be seen clustered in a group no larger than a quarter dead center in the bulls. "Time," Rodriguez called out, ending the shooting phase. As the candidates cleared their weapons and prepared to move downrange to score their targets, the usual chatter and boasting was notably subdued. Davidson had scored 56 points, an excellent result by any standard. Williams had managed 58, and Morrison had scored a respectable 54. When they reached Marcus's target, a crowd gathered around the paper. The 6 holes were so close together that they almost appeared to be a single, slightly elongated opening in the exact center of the bullseye. 60 points, announced the range safety officer, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent group. "Perfect score." Davidson's face flushed red as he stared at the target. He must have had help. Nobody shoots that well with that old rifle, especially not some civilian who probably never held a weapon before joining the academy. "The rifle doesn't make the shooter," Rodriguez said quietly, but his words carried clearly in the still air. "A skilled marksman can achieve precision with any properly maintained weapon. Equipment is secondary to fundamentals." As the group moved to the next phase of testing, a written examination on ballistics, weather effects, and tactical procedures, whispers followed Marcus like shadows. Some candidates wondered if his shooting performance had been a fluke, while others began to reassess their initial impressions of the quiet young man from the lower district. The written examination took place in a sterile classroom building adjacent to the training grounds. Marcus found himself seated in the back row, still isolated from the main group, but no longer completely ignored. He completed the 100-question test methodically, drawing on knowledge gained from years of independent study and his grandfather's extensive library of military manuals. When the results were posted an hour later, the pattern from the shooting range repeated itself. Marcus had scored 98%, missing only a single question about the specific ballistic coefficient of a rarely used ammunition type. Davidson scored 86%, Williams achieved 89%, and Morrison managed 82%. "This is impossible," Davidson said, his voice rising with frustration. Nobody scores that high on both the practical and written portions. He must be cheating somehow. Captain Rodriguez appeared beside the group, as if materializing from thin air. His gray eyes fixed on Davidson with the intensity of a targeting laser. "Are you suggesting that our testing procedures are inadequate, Lieutenant? That our security measures can be compromised by a single candidate?" Davidson's face went pale as he realized the implications of his accusation. "No, sir. I was simply expressing surprise at the results." "Surprise is understandable," Rodriguez replied evenly. "False accusations without evidence are not. I suggest you focus on your own performance rather than questioning the integrity of your fellow candidates." As the sun reached its zenith, the candidates were dismissed for a brief meal period before the afternoon's physical fitness assessment. Marcus ate alone at a corner table in the mess hall, picking at his regulation meal while the other candidates clustered together in animated discussions. "He can't possibly maintain this level of performance," Williams was saying to a group near the center of the room. "Shooting and book knowledge are one thing, but the physical requirements will expose him for what he really is." Morrison nodded agreement, cutting into his steak with more force than necessary. "Look at him. He's probably never run 5 miles in his life, let alone completed an obstacle course in full gear. The Academy physical fitness standards are a joke compared to what the Royal Guard requires." Their confidence was not entirely misplaced. The afternoon physical assessment would include a 5-mile run in full combat gear, followed by an obstacle course that tested agility, strength, and endurance. These were areas where Marcus's slight build seemed to put him at a significant disadvantage compared to the muscled athletes surrounding him. As Marcus finished his meal in silence, he reflected on the morning's events. The shooting had gone well, better than well, actually. His grandfather's training had prepared him for precision marksmanship in ways that the Academy's standard curriculum never could. The written examination had been challenging but manageable, covering topics he had studied extensively during his free time at the Academy. But the physical challenges ahead would test different aspects of his preparation. During his 4 years at the military academy, while other cadets spent their free time socializing or pursuing romantic relationships, Marcus had devoted himself to a rigorous personal fitness regimen. Every morning before dawn, he ran the hills surrounding the academy. Every evening after classes, he worked through bodyweight exercises and endurance drills in the solitude of his dormitory room. His small frame was deceptive. What he lacked in bulk, he had developed in efficiency and endurance. His lean muscles were built for sustained effort rather than explosive power, and his cardiovascular system had been honed by thousands of hours of careful training. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly as the candidates assembled for the physical assessment. They stood in formation wearing full combat gear, helmet, body armor, weapon, and a 40-pound rucksack containing water, ammunition, and emergency supplies. The total weight approached 70 pounds, distributed across their bodies in a way that would test every muscle and joint over the course of the 5-mile run. "Gentlemen," Rodriguez addressed the group while walking slowly along their ranks, "this portion of the assessment will determine your physical readiness for Royal Guard operations. Royal Guard snipers often operate in challenging terrain, sometimes carrying equipment for days before reaching their assigned positions. Physical weakness is not tolerated because it endangers missions and costs lives." He stopped in front of Davidson, whose impressive physique was obvious even under the bulky combat gear. "The course record for this assessment is held by Lieutenant Colonel Harrison, who completed the run and obstacle course in 42 minutes and 18 seconds. That was 15 years ago, and the record still stands." Rodriguez moved to Marcus, studying the young man's determined expression. "Some of you may be tempted to pace yourselves to conserve energy for the obstacle course. I recommend against this strategy. We will be evaluating your overall time as well as your performance on individual elements. There is no benefit to finishing the run quickly if you lack the strength to complete the obstacles." The starting line was marked with white paint on the asphalt road that wound through the academy grounds and into the surrounding countryside. The route would take them through varied terrain, paved roads, dirt trails, steep hills, and stream crossings, before returning to the academy for the obstacle course finale. "On my mark," Rodriguez raised his hand, digital stopwatch ready. 3, 2, 1, go. 24 candidates surged forward as a mass, their boots pounding against the asphalt in an irregular rhythm that gradually sorted itself into individual packing strategies. Davidson immediately took the lead, his long strides eating up ground with impressive efficiency. Williams and Morrison settled into second and third positions, while the rest of the pack strung out behind them. Marcus found himself in the middle of the group initially, maintaining a steady pace that felt sustainable for the long haul. His breathing was controlled and rhythmic, and the weight of his gear felt familiar and manageable. Around him, other candidates were already beginning to show signs of strain as they pushed to keep up with the early leaders. The first mile passed through the academy grounds on smooth pavement, allowing the stronger runners to establish significant leads. Davidson maintained his position at the front, looking comfortable and confident as he set a punishing pace. Behind him, Williams and Morrison worked together, matching each other stride for stride in an unspoken agreement to push the pace higher. As they left the academy grounds and entered the countryside, the terrain became more challenging. The paved road gave way to a packed dirt trail that wound upward into the hills surrounding the military installation. This was where cardiovascular fitness and mental toughness would separate the pretenders from the genuine candidates. Marcus felt his stride settle into the rhythm that had carried him through countless training runs in these same hills. While other candidates began to struggle with the increased grade and uncertain footing, he found himself gradually moving up through the pack. His familiarity with the terrain gave him confidence on the technical sections where rocks and roots threatened to trip unwary runners. By the 2-mile mark, the field had stretched considerably. Davidson still held the lead, but his margin had decreased as the sustained pace and climbing began to take their toll. Williams had dropped back slightly, his face showing the strain of the early fast pace. Morrison was struggling more obviously, his breath coming in harsh gasps as he fought to maintain contact with the leaders. Marcus passed several candidates who had started strong but were now paying the price for their aggressive early pace. His own breathing remained controlled, and the weight of his gear felt distributed and balanced rather than burdensome. He had moved up to 8th place and was continuing to gain ground on the group ahead of him. The third mile included the steepest climbing on the course, a section that rose nearly 400 feet in elevation over the span of a half-mile. This was where the course typically broke candidates who had overtaxed themselves early or who lacked the specific fitness required for sustained uphill running with heavy loads. Davidson's lead evaporated on the climb as his powerful but inefficient stride worked against him on the technical terrain. Williams passed him halfway up the steepest section, while Marcus continued his steady progress through the field. He was now in 5th place and feeling stronger rather than weaker as the run progressed. At the crest of the hill, the course offered a brief respite with a flat section that allowed runners to recover slightly before beginning the descent on the far side. Marcus used this opportunity to assess the candidates ahead of him and plan his strategy for the remaining distance. Williams held the lead but was clearly suffering, his earlier fast pace having depleted his reserves for the climbing. The two candidates in 2nd and 3rd place were unknown quantities, academy runners who had paced themselves conservatively and were now in position to challenge for the overall lead. The descent tested different muscle groups and required careful attention to foot placement on the loose dirt and scattered rocks. Several candidates stumbled, and one went down completely, though he quickly regained his feet and continued running despite obvious pain from a scraped knee and torn uniform. Marcus descended with the confidence born of countless hours running these trails during his personal training sessions. He passed the 3rd-place runner on a technical switchback where his superior terrain knowledge allowed him to choose a better line through a rock garden that slowed his competitor significantly. As they approached the 4-mile mark, Marcus found himself in 3rd place overall and gaining steadily on the two leaders ahead of him. Williams was beginning to struggle visibly, his form deteriorating as fatigue accumulated. The 2nd-place runner was maintaining his position, but showed no signs of being able to increase his pace for a final push. The last mile of the course returned to academy grounds, following paved paths between buildings before finishing at the obstacle course, where the candidates would immediately transition to the final phase of the physical assessment. This section was flat and fast, favoring runners with good finishing speed rather than hill-climbing ability. Marcus had carefully managed his energy reserves for exactly this situation. As they entered the final mile, he increased his pace gradually, his stride lengthening and his turnover rate increasing. The two runners ahead of him were clearly at their limits, while Marcus felt like he was just beginning to tap into his true capabilities. He passed the second-place runner with 600 meters remaining, his surge catching the exhausted candidate completely off guard. Williams, still in the lead but struggling badly, looked over his shoulder and saw Marcus approaching with obvious alarm. With 200 meters to go, Marcus pulled alongside Williams. The Academy standout tried to respond with a surge of his own, but his body had nothing left to give. Marcus pulled away steadily, crossing the finish line with a commanding lead and a time of 28 minutes and 47 seconds for the 5-mile run. Williams finished second, nearly 30 seconds behind, while Davidson managed to rally for third place despite his struggles on the hills. As Marcus caught his breath and prepared for the obstacle course, he could see the other candidates staring at him with a mixture of disbelief and grudging respect. The obstacle course that awaited them would test upper body strength, agility, and mental toughness through a series of challenging barriers and exercises. But Marcus had already proven that the assumptions about his physical capabilities were as wrong as the assumptions about his shooting ability had been. The obstacle course sprawled across 2 acres of the Academy's training area, a formidable gauntlet of challenges designed to push candidates beyond their perceived limitations. As Marcus stood at the starting line, still breathing steadily despite his commanding performance in the 5-mile run, he surveyed the course that would determine whether his morning successes were genuine indicators of capability or merely fortunate coincidences. The first obstacle was a 12-foot rope climb, followed immediately by a traverse across monkey bars suspended 15 feet above a mud pit. After that came a series of low crawls under razor wire, wall climbs of varying heights, tire runs, and finally a 200-meter sprint to the finish while carrying a 70-pound dummy representing a wounded comrade. Davidson had managed to recover somewhat during the brief rest period between the run and obstacle course, his face still flushed but his breathing more controlled. He glared at Marcus with undisguised hostility, clearly frustrated by his third-place finish in an event where he had expected to dominate. "One good run doesn't make you Royal Guard material," Davidson said, loud enough for the other candidates to hear. "Let's see how those skinny arms handle real obstacles." Williams, despite finishing second in the run, was obviously struggling. His legs trembled slightly as he stood, and sweat poured down his face despite the moderate temperature. Morrison appeared to be in even worse condition, having barely finished the run within the cutoff time. Captain Rodriguez watched the candidates with his characteristic stone-faced expression, making notes on his clipboard as he evaluated their recovery rates and mental state. The transition between events was itself a test. The ability to quickly shift from one type of physical challenge to another was crucial for Royal Guard operations. "Gentlemen," Rodriguez announced, "you will attempt the obstacle course in the order you finished the run. Chen, you will go first, followed by Williams, then Davidson. Each candidate will complete the course individually while being timed. The minimum standard is 8 minutes and 30 seconds. Failure to complete any obstacle or completion in more than 10 minutes results in elimination." Marcus stepped to the starting line, feeling the eyes of 23 other candidates fixed on him with varying degrees of skepticism, curiosity, and concern. The rope climb loomed directly ahead, a thick manila rope that hung from a wooden beam with no supports or assistance devices. "Ready," Rodriguez called out, his stopwatch prepared. "Begin." Marcus exploded from the starting line with surprising speed, covering the 20 meters to the rope in a matter of seconds. He leaped upward, grasping the rope with both hands while wrapping his legs around it for support. The technique was flawless, legs providing the primary lifting force while arms maintained grip and balance. His ascent was smooth and efficient, each movement economical and purposeful. Within 15 seconds of starting the climb, he had reached the top beam and was ringing the bell that signaled successful completion. His descent was controlled but rapid, and he dropped the last few feet to land in a rolling motion that absorbed the impact and maintained his forward momentum. The monkey bars presented a different challenge, requiring upper body strength and grip endurance rather than climbing technique. Marcus approached them with the same methodical precision he had shown on the rope, grasping the first bar and beginning his traverse with steady, rhythmic movements. 20 bars stretched across the 15-foot gap above the mud pit, each one requiring a commitment to the next handholds while fighting the accumulating fatigue in forearms and shoulders. Marcus moved steadily across, his slight weight actually proving advantageous as it reduced the strain on his grip. Halfway across, his left hand slipped slightly on a bar made slick by the sweat of previous candidates. For a moment, he hung by one hand while the watching group held their breath, expecting him to drop into the mud below. But Marcus quickly regained his grip and continued across, completing the traverse in under 45 seconds. The low crawl section consisted of 50 meters of muddy ground covered by razor wire strung 18 inches above the surface. This obstacle tested mental toughness as much as physical capability, as candidates had to army crawl on their bellies, while sharp wire threatened to snag uniforms and exposed skin. Marcus dropped to his stomach and began moving forward with the fluid motion of someone who had practiced this specific skill extensively. His elbows and knees worked in coordination, propelling him forward while keeping his head and back low enough to avoid the wire above. The technique appeared effortless, but it required significant core strength and body awareness to maintain the proper position throughout the 50-meter distance. Other candidates had previously struggled with this obstacle, some taking nearly 3 minutes to complete it, while others had been disqualified for standing too high and contacting the wire. Marcus emerged from the far end of the crawl covered in mud, but moving with undiminished energy. His time for the section was just over 60 seconds, setting a pace that would be difficult for the following candidates to match. The wall climbs presented the greatest potential challenge for someone of Marcus's smaller stature. The first wall stood 8 feet high with no handholds or assistance devices. Candidates were required to scale it using only their natural climbing ability and upper body strength. Without hesitation, Marcus approached the wall at a run, planting his right foot against the vertical surface about 4 feet up while simultaneously grasping the top edge with both hands. His momentum and technique combined to pull him smoothly over the obstacle in one fluid motion that drew surprised murmurs from the watching candidates. The second wall was 12 feet high, requiring a more technical approach. Marcus studied it briefly, noting the slight texture in the wooden surface that might provide minimal grip assistance. He backed up several steps, then approached at a sprint. His technique was a masterpiece of physics and body mechanics. At the base of the wall, he planted his left foot and drove upward with his legs while reaching as high as possible with his arms. His fingertips caught the top edge of the wall, and his momentum carried him high enough to get his forearms over the top. From there, it was a matter of upper body strength and technique to pull himself completely over. The movement looked almost gymnastic in its precision and control, and when he dropped to the far side of the wall, several candidates actually applauded despite themselves. The tire run required different skills, agility and quick footwork rather than climbing or crawling. 24 tires were laid out in a zigzag pattern, and candidates had to step through each one without touching the rubber with their feet. Marcus attacked this obstacle with the same focused intensity he had shown throughout the course. His feet moved in a rapid, dance-like pattern, placing each step precisely in the center of each tire while maintaining forward momentum. His smaller size was again an advantage, as he could move through the pattern with less concern about foot placement than larger candidates would face. The final obstacle was perhaps the most demanding, a 200-meter sprint while carrying a 70-pound training dummy designed to simulate a wounded fellow soldier. This challenge tested not only physical strength and endurance, but also the mental commitment to never leave a comrade behind, regardless of personal cost. Marcus hefted the dummy onto his shoulders in a fireman's carry, feeling the full weight settle across his back and shoulders. The dummy was deliberately unwieldy, with flexible limbs that shifted and moved in ways that made carrying it as difficult as possible. His sprint was more of a controlled run, but it was faster than many candidates could have managed carrying no additional weight. His legs pumped steadily, eating up the distance while his core muscles worked to stabilize the shifting load on his shoulders. At the 100-meter mark, Marcus showed no signs of slowing. His breathing was labored but controlled, and his stride remained consistent despite the accumulating fatigue from the previous obstacles. The other candidates watched in growing amazement as their supposedly weak competitor maintained his pace with the heavy dummy. With 50 meters remaining, Marcus actually increased his pace slightly, drawing on reserves of strength and determination that belied his slight appearance. He crossed the finish line and gently lowered the dummy to the ground before straightening up to face Captain Rodriguez. Time 6 minutes and 42 seconds, Rodriguez announced, consulting his stopwatch. Well done. The course record that Rodriguez had mentioned earlier was 6 minutes and 18 seconds, meaning Marcus had come within 24 seconds of a mark that had stood for over a decade. More importantly, he had completed every obstacle with technical precision and obvious strength reserves remaining. Williams stepped to the starting line next, his face pale but determined. The pressure of following Marcus's performance was obvious, and the shaking in his legs suggested that his reserves were already depleted from the 5-mile run. His rope climb was labored and slow, taking nearly 40 seconds to reach the top. The descent was uncontrolled, and he dropped heavily to the ground, jarring his already fatigued legs. By the time he reached the monkey bars, his hands were visibly shaking. Williams made it halfway across the bars before his grip failed completely. He dropped into the mud pit below with a splash that covered him in thick, dark mud. According to the rules, he was required to restart the obstacle from the beginning after climbing out of the pit. His second attempt was even less successful. The combination of slippery hands and accumulated fatigue meant that he fell again after traversing only 6 bars. On his third attempt, he managed to complete the traverse, but had already consumed nearly 4 minutes of his allotted time. The remaining obstacles proved equally challenging for Williams. His wall-climbing technique was crude compared to Marcus's fluid movements, and he struggled to complete the 12-foot wall even after multiple attempts. By the time he reached the tire run, he was moving like a man in slow motion. Williams's final time was 9 minutes and 56 seconds, well over the preferred standard, but still within the maximum allowable time. He collapsed at the finish line, completely exhausted and covered in mud from head to toe. Davidson approached his attempt with visible determination, clearly motivated to redeem himself after his disappointing performance in the 5-mile run. His greater size and strength were apparent as he powered up the rope climb in impressive time, muscles bulging as he hauled himself upward with brute force. The monkey bars suited his build perfectly, and he traversed them with the confidence of someone who had trained extensively on similar obstacles. His technique was less refined than Marcus's, but his raw strength compensated for any inefficiencies. Davidson's approach to the low crawl revealed both his capabilities and limitations. He moved quickly through the obstacle, but his larger frame made the position more uncomfortable and energy-intensive than it had been for Marcus. He emerged from the far end breathing heavily, but still moving well. The wall climbs showcased Davidson's athletic ability. He scaled the 8-foot wall with ease, his reach and jumping ability allowing him to clear it almost effortlessly. The 12-foot wall required more effort, but his superior reach meant he could grasp the top edge more easily than shorter candidates. His tire run was competent, but lacked the fluid grace that Marcus had displayed. Davidson's larger feet made precise placement more challenging, and he clipped several tires without actually stepping on them, technical violations that would add time penalties to his score. The final carry proved to be Davidson's strongest event. His powerful build was perfectly suited for the 70-pound dummy, and he completed the 200-meter sprint with obvious reserves remaining. His technique was less refined than Marcus's fireman's carry, but his strength allowed him to essentially run normally while carrying the additional weight. Davidson's final time was 7 minutes and 8 seconds, a solid performance that would have been impressive under normal circumstances. However, following Marcus's exceptional demonstration, it felt almost disappointing. As the remaining candidates attempted the course, a pattern emerged. Most struggled significantly with one or more obstacles, and several were eliminated entirely for failing to complete specific challenges or exceeding the 10-minute maximum time. Morrison, despite his strong performance in the written examination, proved unable to complete the 12-foot wall climb after multiple attempts. His upper body strength was insufficient for the technique required, and his earlier struggles during the 5-mile run had left him too fatigued to compensate with determination alone. 3 other candidates failed the monkey bars entirely, falling into the mud pit on every attempt and eventually being declared eliminated. 2 more exceeded the time limit, moving so slowly through the obstacles that they were stopped before reaching the finish line. By the end of the physical assessment day, only 15 of the original 24 candidates remained in the selection process. Marcus had not only survived, but had delivered the most dominant performance of the day, setting new unofficial records in both the 5-mile run and the overall obstacle course time. As the candidates gathered for the evening briefing, the atmosphere had shifted noticeably. The easy confidence and casual dismissal of Marcus that had characterized the morning was gone, replaced by wary respect and growing concern about their own chances of selection. "Tomorrow," Captain Rodriguez announced to the reduced group, "we begin the tactical phase of selection. You will be tested on stalking, camouflage, target identification, and field craft. These skills separate snipers from ordinary marksmen." He paused, scanning the tired faces of the remaining candidates. "The scenarios you will face are based on actual Royal Guard missions from the past 5 years. Failure is not just elimination from the selection process. In real operations, it would mean mission failure and potentially the deaths of those you are sworn to protect." Rodriguez's eyes settled on Marcus for a moment, and the slight nod he gave was barely perceptible to the other candidates. "Get cleaned up, get fed, and get rested. Tomorrow will test different aspects of your capabilities, and I suspect some of you will find it even more challenging than today's events." As the group dispersed to their quarters, Marcus could feel the weight of changed perceptions. Davidson no longer looked at him with open contempt, but rather with the careful assessment of a competitor who had been forced to revise his expectations. Williams avoided eye contact entirely, still struggling to process his own near elimination. The real test, Marcus knew, was just beginning. Physical capability and marksmanship were important, but the Royal Guard Sniper Corps demanded much more. Mental toughness, tactical thinking, and the ability to operate independently under extreme pressure were the qualities that separated the elite from the merely competent. That evening, as Marcus lay in his narrow dormitory bunk, he reflected on the day's events with quiet satisfaction. He had proven to himself and others that his capabilities extended far beyond what his appearance suggested. But tomorrow would bring new challenges that would test different aspects of his training and preparation. The other candidates were undoubtedly reassessing their strategies and preparing for the tactical phase of selection. Some would try to identify weaknesses in Marcus's performance that they could exploit. Others would focus on their own preparation, hoping to excel in areas where they felt more confident. Marcus's approach would remain the same as it had been throughout his military academy career: thorough preparation, focused execution, and the quiet confidence that came from knowing he had done everything possible to ready himself for the challenges ahead. The mockery and dismissal of the morning felt like a distant memory, but he understood that earning respect was only the first step in proving he belonged among the elite ranks of the Royal Guard. As he drifted toward sleep, Marcus allowed himself a moment of pride in the day's accomplishments. But the selection process was far from over, and tomorrow would bring new opportunities to demonstrate that his performance had been no accident. The Royal Guard Sniper Corps demanded excellence in every aspect of military operations, and he was determined to meet those standards regardless of what obstacles lay ahead. Dawn broke gray and misty over the training area as the remaining 15 candidates assembled for the tactical phase of Royal Guard selection. The morning air carried a chill that made breath visible, and dew covered every surface with a slick coating that would challenge movement and observation. Marcus arrived at the designated assembly area precisely on time, his gear meticulously arranged, and his uniform clean despite the previous day's muddy obstacles. Around him, the other candidates displayed varying degrees of nervousness and fatigue. The physical eliminations had sobered everyone to the reality that this selection process would spare no one who failed to meet its exacting standards. Davidson stood near the center of the group, his posture straight and confident despite his struggles the previous day. He had clearly spent the evening reassessing Marcus as a legitimate competitor rather than a fortunate amateur, but his competitive nature remained undimmed. The son of a decorated general was not accustomed to being overshadowed by anyone, let alone someone from such humble circumstances. Captain Rodriguez emerged from a camouflaged field shelter that hadn't been visible until he opened its concealed entrance. He wore full field gear including face paint and a ghillie suit that made him nearly invisible against the background vegetation, even in broad daylight. "Gentlemen," Rodriguez began, his voice carrying easily across the quiet morning air. "Yesterday tested your physical capabilities and basic marksmanship. Today we evaluate the skills that separate snipers from ordinary soldiers, the ability to remain undetected while gathering intelligence and engaging targets at extended ranges." He gestured toward the rolling hills and dense woodland that stretched beyond the formal training areas. "This terrain contains multiple objectives that you must locate and evaluate while remaining unobserved by opposing forces. You will work individually, and you will be hunted." The captain's words sent a visible chill through the group that had nothing to do with the morning temperature. The concept of being actively pursued while trying to complete mission objectives added layers of complexity that none of them had fully anticipated. "Your first task is reconnaissance," Rodriguez continued, producing a detailed topographical map from his gear. "Intelligence reports indicate enemy forces have established 3 observation posts somewhere in grid squares 47 through 69. You must locate these positions, identify the equipment being used, and estimate the number of personnel at each site." Marcus studied the map carefully when it was passed to him, memorizing the terrain features and potential routes of approach. The designated area covered approximately 6 square kilometers of challenging terrain, including dense woods, rocky outcroppings, and several steep ravines that would provide concealment, but also create choke points where opposing forces might concentrate their searches. "The second task," Rodriguez said, "is target elimination. Within the reconnaissance area, you will find 3 high-value targets marked with orange panels. These represent enemy commanders who must be eliminated without alerting other hostile forces. You will have access to paintball marking ammunition for this exercise." He paused, allowing the implications to sink in. "The third task is evasion. Once you begin moving through the objective area, you will be actively hunted by experienced tracker teams. If you are detected and tagged by opposing forces, you are eliminated from selection regardless of your performance on the other tasks." The complexity of the mission was staggering. Candidates would need to navigate difficult terrain, locate concealed objectives, make accurate observations, engage simulated targets at unknown ranges, and do it all while avoiding detection by skilled hunters who knew the terrain intimately. "You have 8 hours to complete all tasks and return to this assembly area," Rodriguez announced. "Equipment inspection in 10 minutes, then you deploy at 5-minute intervals to prevent following or cooperation between candidates." Marcus used the inspection time to make final adjustments to his gear. He had modified his standard equipment load to emphasize stealth and observation capability over heavy firepower. His rifle was equipped with a high-quality scope for target engagement, but he also carried compact binoculars and a spotting scope for reconnaissance work. His ghillie suit was a carefully crafted piece of camouflage that he had been improving throughout his academy years. Unlike the standard-issue versions used by most candidates, Marcus had hand-sewn additional vegetation loops and adjusted the coloring to match the specific terrain of the training area. The face paint he applied was mixed from 3 different colors to create shadows and depth that would break up the recognizable patterns of human facial features. His hands received the same treatment, as did any exposed skin around his collar and wrists. When his turn came for inspection, Captain Rodriguez spent several extra moments examining Marcus's preparations. The older soldier's experienced eyes noted details that most candidates had missed. The way Marcus had secured every piece of equipment to prevent noise, the care taken to eliminate any reflective surfaces, and the sophisticated ghillie suit that would provide excellent concealment in the local vegetation. "Interesting modifications," Rodriguez commented quietly, adjusting the position of a vegetation bundle on Marcus's shoulder. "Where did you learn these techniques?" "My grandfather served in the border wars," Marcus replied. "He taught me that the best camouflage is the kind your enemy never notices at all." Rodriguez nodded approvingly. "Wise man, deploy on your heading in 60 seconds. Marcus was the 7th candidate to enter the field, which meant that several others were already moving through the terrain ahead of him. This presented both advantages and disadvantages. Their movement might have already alerted the tracker teams to begin active hunting, but it also meant that some objectives might already be located and intelligence gathered that could guide his own approach. His initial route took him through a section of dense woodland that provided excellent concealment, but required careful navigation to avoid becoming disoriented. Marcus moved with deliberate patience, pausing frequently to observe his surroundings and listen for any sounds that might indicate the presence of other candidates or tracker teams. The first observation post was supposed to be located somewhere in the southeastern portion of the target area, positioned to overlook a valley that served as a natural avenue of approach. Marcus spent nearly an hour moving into position to glass the suspected area, using terrain features to mask his approach and never exposing himself for more than a few seconds at a time. Through his binoculars, he systematically searched the tree lines and rocky outcroppings that offered good observation points. The morning mist was beginning to burn off, improving visibility, but also increasing the risk of detection if he became careless with his positioning. He found the first observation post concealed among a cluster of boulders about 800 meters away. Two figures in camouflage were visible through his optics, and they appeared to be equipped with radio equipment and optical observation devices. Marcus carefully sketched the position in his field notebook, noting the personnel count, equipment visible, and fields of observation. Moving to his second objective required crossing nearly 2 kilometers of varied terrain while avoiding several areas where tracker teams were likely to focus their search efforts. Marcus selected a route that took him through the most challenging terrain, steep ravines and dense undergrowth that would slow his movement, but also make detection less likely. The second observation post took him 3 hours to locate. It was positioned on a wooded hilltop with excellent concealment and broad fields of view. The personnel there had done an exceptional job of blending their position into the natural environment, and Marcus only spotted them when he noticed the slight geometric regularity of a camouflage net that didn't quite match the surrounding vegetation patterns. This position contained 3 personnel and appeared to have more sophisticated equipment than the first site. Marcus spent additional time observing their operations, noting communication patterns and equipment capabilities that would be valuable intelligence for mission planning. Finding the third observation post proved to be the most challenging task. The designated grid square contained several likely positions, but systematic searching revealed nothing obvious. Marcus realized that this position was either exceptionally well concealed or located in a spot that didn't conform to standard tactical thinking. After nearly an hour of fruitless searching, he changed his approach. Instead of looking for obvious observation points, he began searching for positions that offered concealment and escape routes rather than optimal fields of view. This led him to discover the third post hidden in a depression that was nearly invisible from any angle except directly above. The position contained only one person, but their equipment appeared to be the most advanced of the 3 sites. Marcus suspected this might be a command post or specialized intelligence-gathering position rather than a standard observation point. With reconnaissance complete, Marcus began searching for the high-value targets that represented enemy commanders requiring elimination. These targets would be located separately from the observation posts, presenting additional navigation and stalking challenges. The first target was positioned near a small clearing approximately 1,500 meters from the third observation post. Marcus approached the area with extreme caution, knowing that tracker teams were likely using choke points and obvious approach routes to ambush candidates attempting to reach the targets. His stalking approach took over an hour, moving in short bounds with long observation periods between each movement. The target was visible through his scope, an orange panel attached to a mannequin positioned to simulate an enemy commander conducting a briefing. The shot would need to be taken from a range of nearly 600 meters with challenging wind conditions and limited shooting positions available. Marcus selected his firing position carefully, ensuring that he had multiple escape routes and that his muzzle blast would be concealed from the most likely locations of opposing forces. His first shot struck the target center mass, marking it with bright orange paint that confirmed a successful engagement. Marcus immediately began his withdrawal, moving quickly but carefully away from the firing position before any tracker teams could respond to the sound of his shot. The second target required him to move across nearly a kilometer of relatively open ground where concealment was limited and the risk of detection was highest. Marcus waited for a weather system to move through, using the reduced visibility and sound masking of a light rain shower to cover his movement. This target was positioned at the edge of a small pond, representing an enemy commander conducting reconnaissance of water obstacles. The range was approximately 400 meters, but the shooting position required Marcus to fire across the water surface, which could create challenging ballistic conditions due to temperature variations and wind patterns. His second shot was equally successful, striking the target and confirming another successful engagement. However, as he prepared to withdraw from the position, Marcus spotted movement in the tree line behind his target. A tracker team was moving through the area, clearly responding to reports of his previous shot. Marcus froze in place, trusting his camouflage and remaining motionless as three figures in woodland camouflage moved through the area below his position. They were clearly experienced professionals, moving with the coordinated precision of a practiced team and carrying sophisticated tracking equipment. For 15 minutes, Marcus remained completely motionless while the tracker team searched the area around the target. They came within 20 meters of his concealed position, and he could hear their radio communications as they coordinated with other teams in the area. When they finally moved on, Marcus waited another 10 minutes before beginning his own movement toward the final target. The encounter had reminded him that the tracker teams were skilled opponents who were actively adapting their search patterns based on candidate activities. The third target was the most challenging, located in terrain that offered limited approach routes and excellent observation points for tracker teams to monitor candidate movements. Marcus spent nearly 2 hours planning his approach, using his map and personal observations to identify a route that would minimize his exposure while still allowing access to an effective shooting position. His final approach was a masterpiece of fieldcraft, utilizing every available piece of concealment while moving through terrain that appeared to offer none. He army-crawled the final 200 meters, using a drainage ditch that was barely deep enough to hide his outline while providing a clear view of the target area. The third target was positioned at a range of nearly 800 meters, requiring precise adjustment for wind and elevation. Marcus took his time with the shot preparation, knowing that this would be his most difficult engagement and that any miss would likely attract tracker team attention to his general area. His third shot struck the target successfully, completing the engagement phase of the mission. However, his withdrawal was complicated by the approach of another tracker team that had apparently been monitoring the target area in anticipation of candidate attempts. Marcus found himself in a complex evasion scenario, with tracker teams approaching from multiple directions and limited escape routes available. He selected the most difficult route, a steep ravine filled with loose rock and dense vegetation that would challenge both his movement abilities and those of his pursuers. The evasion phase tested every aspect of his training and preparation. Marcus moved through the ravine system for nearly an hour, using the challenging terrain to break visual contact while gradually working his way back toward the assembly area. At one point, he was forced to hide motionless in a thicket while a tracker team passed within arm's reach of his position. His camouflage and field discipline were tested to their limits as boots stopped mere feet from where he lay concealed. When Marcus finally reached the assembly area, he discovered that he was only the third candidate to return successfully. 2 others had been eliminated by tracker teams during their evasion attempts, while the remainder were still in the field attempting to complete their missions. Captain Rodriguez conducted a brief debriefing, confirming that Marcus had successfully located all 3 observation posts, accurately estimated personnel and equipment at each site, and successfully engaged all 3 high-value targets. His reconnaissance sketches were detailed and accurate, and his mission timeline demonstrated efficient movement and tactical thinking. "Outstanding performance," Rodriguez commented as he reviewed Marcus's field notes. "Professional-level reconnaissance and target engagement executed with minimal risk exposure. The tracker teams reported that you were the most difficult candidate to detect and track." As the afternoon wore on, other candidates gradually returned to the assembly area with varying degrees of success. Davidson had successfully located 2 of the 3 observation posts and engaged 2 targets, but had been detected and tagged by a tracker team during his evasion attempt, resulting in elimination from the selection process. Williams had struggled with the navigation requirements and had only located 1 observation post and 1 target before running out of time. His performance, while not disqualifying, placed him near the bottom of the remaining candidates. By evening, only 9 candidates remained in the selection process. The tactical phase had eliminated 6 more, including Davidson, whose elimination sent shock waves through the group. If someone with his background and physical capabilities could be eliminated, then no one could consider their position secure. Tomorrow, Rodriguez announced to the surviving candidates, we conduct the final evaluation phase. You will face scenarios based on actual Royal Guard missions, and you will be evaluated on decision-making under pressure, technical proficiency, and moral judgment. He paused, studying the tired faces of the 9 remaining candidates. The scenarios you will face tomorrow have eliminated more candidates than any other portion of this selection process. Technical skills can be taught, but character and judgment under pressure cannot be trained in a classroom. That evening, as Marcus cleaned and maintained his equipment, he reflected on the day's events with quiet satisfaction. The tactical phase had played to his strengths, patience, attention to detail, and the fieldcraft skills his grandfather had taught him during countless hunting trips and wilderness expeditions. The elimination of Davidson had surprised everyone, including Marcus. Despite his personal flaws, Davidson was undeniably skilled and had seemed destined for selection. His elimination served as a stark reminder that the Royal Guard standards were uncompromising, and that even small errors in judgment or execution could result in immediate failure. The final phase of selection would test aspects of character and decision-making that couldn't be practiced or rehearsed. Marcus would need to draw on his personal values and moral foundation to navigate scenarios that were designed to reveal the true character of each candidate. As he settled into his bunk for what might be his final night in the selection process, Marcus felt a calm confidence that had nothing to do with arrogance or overconfidence. He had proven to himself and others that he possessed the skills and determination to compete at the highest levels. Tomorrow would test whether he also possessed the character and judgment required to serve in the most elite unit of the kingdom's military forces. The final day of Royal Guard selection began before sunrise with an unexpected development. As Marcus and the remaining 8 candidates assembled in the pre-dawn darkness, they found Captain Rodriguez waiting with a man they didn't recognize. A tall, distinguished figure in an immaculate dress uniform bearing the insignia of a full colonel. "Gentlemen," Rodriguez announced, "allow me to introduce Colonel Harrison, commanding officer of the Royal Guard Sniper Corps. He will be overseeing today's final evaluations personally." Colonel Harrison stepped forward, his bearing radiating the quiet authority of a career military officer who had earned his position through demonstrated competence rather than political connections. His steel-gray eyes swept across the 9 remaining candidates with the calculating assessment of someone who had seen every type of soldier the military could produce. "Today you will face 3 scenarios," Harrison said, his voice carrying easily in the still morning air. "These are not training exercises or simulations. Each scenario is based on an actual mission that Royal Guard snipers have conducted within the past 2 years. Your responses will determine not only whether you are selected for the Corps, but whether you possess the character and judgment required to serve in situations where lives depend on your decisions." The colonel paused, allowing the weight of his words to settle. "The first scenario tests your ability to make tactical decisions under time pressure. The second evaluates your judgment when mission parameters conflict with personal safety. The third assesses your moral courage when faced with orders that may conflict with your conscience." Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning temperature. The description suggested that the final evaluations would push candidates into genuinely difficult ethical and tactical territory, the kind of gray areas where textbook answers might not exist and where character would be revealed under pressure. "Williams, you will go first," Harrison announced. "Chen, you're second. The rest of you will follow in order of your performance during yesterday's tactical exercise." Williams stepped forward with visible nervousness, his face pale in the dim light. Despite surviving to the final phase, his marginal performances throughout the selection process had left him in a precarious position where even small errors could result in elimination. "Your scenario," Harrison began, "is as follows. You are providing overwatch for a diplomatic convoy traveling through hostile territory. Intelligence reports indicate a high probability of ambush at 3 locations along the route. You have communication with the convoy commander, but radio discipline requires that transmissions be kept to absolute minimum. The colonel gestured toward a detailed terrain model that had been set up during the night. The convoy is approaching the first danger area. Your observation post provides excellent visibility, but you are alone and cannot cover all 3 potential ambush sites simultaneously. You must decide how to position yourself and when to communicate with the convoy. Williams studied the terrain model carefully, his brow furrowed in concentration. The scenario presented multiple competing priorities: maximizing observation capability, maintaining communication security, and providing effective protection for the convoy all had to be balanced against the limitations of operating as a single sniper. I would position myself to cover the most likely ambush site based on terrain analysis, Williams said finally. The high ground overlooking the bridge provides the best fields of fire for hostile forces and would be my primary concern. Harrison nodded but did not indicate whether the response was satisfactory. The convoy is now approaching the bridge. Through your scope, you observe armed figures moving into position among the rocks on the far side. However, they are not displaying hostile intent. No weapons are visible, and they might be local civilians. Rules of engagement prohibit engagement unless you confirm hostile intent. What are your actions? The complexity of the scenario was becoming apparent. Williams would need to make split-second decisions about threat assessment while managing communication with the convoy and maintaining his own security. His face showed the strain of trying to process multiple variables simultaneously. I would maintain observation and prepare to engage if hostile intent becomes apparent, Williams replied. Simultaneously, I would send a coded warning to the convoy to indicate potential threats without compromising radio security. As you prepare your radio transmission, Harrison continued, you observe additional armed figures moving into position at the second and third ambush sites. The convoy is committed to the bridge approach and cannot withdraw. You now face threats at all 3 locations with insufficient time to warn the convoy about each site individually. Your decision. Williams was clearly struggling with the escalating complexity of the scenario. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool morning air as he tried to process the tactical implications of simultaneous threats at multiple locations. I would engage the most immediate threat while transmitting a general warning to the convoy, he said, his voice lacking confidence. Then attempt to reposition to cover additional threats as the situation develops. Harrison's expression remained neutral as he concluded Williams's evaluation. You may step back, Chen, you're next. Marcus stepped forward, feeling the eyes of the other candidates fixed on him with varying degrees of anxiety and curiosity. The scenario Williams had faced demonstrated that the evaluations would push candidates into genuinely difficult decision-making territory where perfect solutions might not exist. Your scenario, Harrison began, involves close protection of a high-value target during a public ceremony. You are positioned in an overwatch position 300 meters from the primary venue. Intelligence indicates a credible assassination threat, but the specifics of the threat are unknown. Marcus studied the terrain model that had been modified to represent an urban environment with multiple buildings, crowd areas, and potential sniper positions. The complexity was immediately apparent. Protecting a stationary target in a public setting presented challenges that rural tactical scenarios did not address. During the ceremony, Harrison continued, you observe a figure in a window of a building 400 meters from your target. The individual appears to be carrying what might be a rifle, but lighting conditions make positive identification difficult. The ceremony is proceeding normally, and aborting would cause significant political complications. The ethical dimensions of the scenario were immediately clear. Marcus would need to make decisions about potentially lethal force based on incomplete information, while balancing mission success against political considerations and the safety of innocent civilians. I would immediately notify my command of the potential threat while maintaining continuous observation of the suspect position, Marcus replied. Without positive identification of hostile intent, engagement would not be justified, but preparation for immediate response would be essential. Harrison nodded. As you maintain observation, the suspect moves deeper into the window position and appears to be manipulating what could be a weapon system. However, you also observe that the building contains multiple civilian occupants who could be endangered by any engagement. The ceremony is reaching its climax, and your protected target is fully exposed. Your decision. Marcus considered the scenario carefully, recognizing that this was exactly the type of moral complexity that Royal Guard snipers would face in real operations. Every choice carried significant consequences, and hesitation could be as dangerous as precipitous action. I would take a covered position that would allow immediate engagement while requesting immediate evacuation of the protected target through alternate communication channels, Marcus said. If the suspect demonstrates clear hostile intent by presenting a weapon, I would engage with careful consideration for civilian safety and precise shot placement to minimize collateral damage. The suspect has now presented what appears to be a rifle and is aligning it toward your protected target, Harrison said. However, at that moment, you observe through peripheral vision that a child has appeared in the window directly behind your intended target area. Engagement would place the child at risk, but delaying engagement could result in the assassination of your protected target. Your decision. The scenario had escalated to exactly the type of impossible choice that would test character and moral courage under extreme pressure. Marcus felt the weight of the decision, understanding that there was no textbook answer that would satisfy all moral and tactical requirements simultaneously. I would adjust my point of aim to minimize risk to the child while ensuring effective neutralization of the threat, Marcus replied. If the angle does not allow for a clean shot, I would attempt to disrupt the assassination attempt through near-miss shots while continuing to request immediate evacuation of the protected target. Harrison studied Marcus for a long moment before nodding. Step back, Morrison, you're next. The scenarios continued throughout the morning, each one presenting different but equally challenging moral and tactical dilemmas. Morrison faced a hostage situation where engagement rules conflicted with the immediate safety of innocent civilians. Johnson dealt with a scenario where following orders might compromise his own safety and mission success. Each candidate's responses revealed different aspects of their character and decision-making processes. Some prioritized strict adherence to rules and procedures, while others showed willingness to adapt to changing circumstances even when it meant accepting personal risk. By midday, 3 more candidates had been eliminated based on their responses to the scenarios. Their failures were not due to lack of technical knowledge or physical capability, but rather due to judgment errors or moral choices that the evaluators found incompatible with Royal Guard responsibilities. Marcus found himself among the final 6 candidates as they prepared for the afternoon phase of testing. The morning's scenarios had proven that technical proficiency was only a foundation. The real selection criteria focused on character traits that could not be taught or rehearsed. The afternoon scenarios, Colonel Harrison announced to the remaining group, will involve live-fire exercises with actual consequences. You will be firing live ammunition in support of simulated operations where your decisions and accuracy will directly affect the success or failure of mission objectives. The colonel's words sent a visible shock through the candidates. Live-fire exercises with operational consequences represented a level of realism that none of them had anticipated. The margin for error would be eliminated entirely, and any mistakes could have genuine safety implications. The first exercise involves precision shooting in support of a simulated hostage rescue operation. You will be required to engage targets in close proximity to friendly forces, requiring absolute precision and complete confidence in your equipment and abilities. Marcus felt his pulse quicken as he contemplated the implications. Shooting in close support of friendly forces eliminated any margin for error and placed tremendous responsibility on the sniper's judgment and technical skill. A missed shot or equipment malfunction could result in friendly casualties, even in a training environment. The hostage rescue scenario was conducted on a specially designed range that simulated an urban environment with multiple buildings and realistic target arrays. Each candidate would fire from a position 300 meters away, engaging hostile targets while avoiding civilian and friendly force representations positioned throughout the target area. Chen, you will demonstrate first, Harrison announced, gesturing toward the designated firing position. Marcus approached the shooting position with the focused calm that had characterized his performance throughout the selection process. The scenario required him to engage 5 hostile targets positioned among twice as many friendly and civilian targets, all within a confined area that would test his precision and target discrimination abilities. Through his rifle scope, Marcus could see the detailed target array. The hostile targets were marked with red indicators, while friendly forces bore blue markers and civilians were unmarked. The distances varied from 280 to 320 meters, and several targets were positioned so close together that precision placement would be critical. "Commence engagement when ready," Harrison called out. "You have 60 seconds to engage all hostile targets." Marcus controlled his breathing and settled into his shooting position. The first target was positioned on a balcony with a civilian target visible just 2 feet to the left. The shot required absolute precision to avoid any possibility of error. His first shot struck the hostile target center mass, the impact clearly visible through his scope. Marcus worked his bolt smoothly, acquiring the second target while maintaining awareness of the overall tactical situation. The second target was the most challenging, a hostile figure positioned in a doorway with friendly forces visible on both sides. The shot angle was narrow, requiring Marcus to thread his bullet through a gap barely wider than the projectile itself. His second shot was equally precise, striking the target without endangering the surrounding friendly forces. The third and fourth targets followed in rapid succession, each shot demonstrating the kind of precision that left no doubt about Marcus's technical capabilities. The final target presented a different challenge, a hostile figure holding a civilian as a human shield. The shot required Marcus to engage only the hostile target while ensuring the absolute safety of the innocent person being used as cover. Marcus took additional time with this shot, carefully aligning his crosshairs to ensure that his bullet placement would neutralize the threat without endangering the civilian. His fifth shot struck the hostile target precisely, completing the engagement sequence with 52 seconds to spare. "Excellent shooting," Harrison commented, studying the target results through binoculars. "All hostile targets neutralized with no friendly casualties, professional-level precision under pressure." The remaining candidates followed, with varying degrees of success. 2 candidates missed hostile targets entirely, while another accidentally engaged a civilian target, resulting in immediate elimination from the selection process. Morrison performed well but required the full 60 seconds to complete his engagement sequence, suggesting less efficiency than Marcus had demonstrated. Johnson achieved good accuracy but showed visible stress during the exercise that might indicate difficulty performing under pressure. As the afternoon progressed, additional scenarios tested different aspects of sniper operations. Marcus consistently demonstrated superior performance, combining technical precision with tactical judgment and calm decision-making under pressure. The final exercise of the day involved a complex scenario where candidates had to coordinate with ground forces while providing overwatch for a simulated assault on a fortified position. The exercise required radio communication, tactical coordination, and precise engagement of multiple targets in support of friendly forces. Marcus found himself working with an actual Royal Guard assault team, professional soldiers who evaluated his communication skills and tactical integration as much as his shooting ability. The realism was complete: genuine tactical radios, live ammunition, and operational-level coordination requirements. His performance during the final exercise was flawless. Marcus provided accurate intelligence about enemy positions, coordinated his fires with the assault team's movements, and engaged 6 targets with perfect accuracy while maintaining constant communication with ground forces. When the exercise concluded, the assault team leader approached Colonel Harrison with obvious enthusiasm. "Sir, I would be honored to work with that sniper in actual operations. His communication was clear, his tactical awareness was exceptional, and his shooting was the best I've seen from a candidate." As evening approached, the 9 original candidates had been reduced to just 3: Marcus, Morrison, and Johnson. The elimination rate during the final day had been severe, but the remaining candidates had proven themselves capable of operating at the level required for Royal Guard service. "Gentlemen," Colonel Harrison addressed the 3 survivors, "you have demonstrated that you possess the technical skills and character required for service in the Royal Guard Sniper Corps. However, there are only 2 positions available in the upcoming class." The colonel paused, studying each candidate carefully. "The final selection will be based on your overall performance throughout the entire evaluation process, with particular emphasis on your demonstrated ability to perform under pressure and your capacity for continued improvement. Marcus felt the weight of the moment, understanding that everything he had worked toward was now dependent on a decision that was beyond his control. He had given his absolute best effort in every phase of the selection process, but the final outcome would be determined by factors that he could not influence. The results of this selection will be announced tomorrow morning, Harrison concluded. You are dismissed to your quarters. Congratulations on making it this far. Reaching this point is an achievement that fewer than 5% of original candidates managed to accomplish. As the three finalists walked back to their quarters, the atmosphere was subdued and thoughtful. Each had invested tremendous effort in the selection process, and each had proven themselves capable of exceptional performance under pressure. Tomorrow would determine which two would be selected for the ultimate honor of serving in the Royal Guard Sniper Corps.